running the biology department. I've been working with some other faculty members and community members and some students to organize these environmental awareness events. We had one last November. It was a recycling panel. It's good to see a lot of you back. We were there for that one. We want to just welcome you, especially people from outside King, from the community. It's good to see you here with our students and our faculty and staff. And we want to kind of have more events like this going where we all get together and learn. Keep an eye out for these. There are some clipboards in your seats. A lot of you guys have those. And they're a way for you to give us your contact information if you want to hear about these events coming up. We won't use them for any other purpose other than just to let you know about things like this. And there's also a questionnaire, if you guys don't mind filling that out. You can fill that out after Dr. Van Dyke's presentation. But it's just to kind of give us some feedback and information about things that you, what are your thoughts and what you think you'd like to hear in the future. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Van Dyke, but before I do, please make sure your cell phones are silenced so we don't have any distractions during this. And looking forward to hearing Dr. Van Dyke. So Dr. Fred Van Dyke is the director of the All Sable Institute, and he's visiting us from Michigan, where the All Sable Institute is located. King has a relationship with the All Sable Institute where our students can go up to their campus in Michigan or some of their other campuses around the world and take environmental or ecology-related courses for credit here at King. So it's a great opportunity not only to learn, but to grow in a spiritual community, focus on the environment. And so we're very thankful that Dr. Van Dyke is here with us tonight. He's had a lot of academic and professional accomplishments. I won't go through all of those right now, but needless to say, it's a great honor for him to be here. His talk is entitled, "What is Land For?" And I think it's a biblical perspective on land use, so it's going to be very interesting. So I'll give it over to Dr. Van Dyke.
Thanks, everybody. When I first saw all those clipboards on the chairs, I thought the talk was being graded. What a relief. It's great to see you. It's my second visit to King, and this one's even more fun than the first. I really enjoyed being here with you. I want to talk about another state as I begin. I am a resident of Michigan. This was not always so. I made that decision in August of 2011 when I accepted the position of being the executive director of the Sable Institute. I was born in Ohio, living in Illinois at the time. I've had residences in 13 different states, always one step ahead of the sheriff. But Michigan has become my favorite of these. When you live in a land that you love, and you find it full of its own special beauty, it's hard to believe that sometimes people will thoughtlessly abuse that land. And yet that's not a problem that's unique to Michigan. When you live in a land to love, you find, in fact, that it isn't difficult to believe that there ought to be a right and a wrong way to treat land. But the question is, what would be the basis of that treatment? And how would we tell right from wrong? This will give you an idea of one of the kinds of problems of right and wrong land treatment that we're trying to solve in Michigan that's literally at our doorstep at the Institute. Get this in here, but we practiced. What's going on here, Josh? Let's just put the plate on that. I'm Fred Van Dyke, Executive Director of the Sable Institute. And we're here on an abandoned oil drilling pad in Kalkaska County, northern Michigan, not very far from our Great Lakes campus. There are thousands of these pads around us in northern Michigan, and in talking with foresters and the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, we find that these pads never reforest on their own, even though they're surrounded by forest, even 10, 20, and 30 years after the drilling activity has ceased. Working with the state of Michigan and private energy companies, Sable has designed an experiment to plant 4 different native species of forest trees on these pads and subject them to 4 different treatments of the soil. With these 16 different combinations, we can determine the best possible combination of species and treatment that will lead to the reforestation of these paths by tracking the fate of every tree that we plant. Our goal, from what we learned, is to be able to make more forest, not more oil pads. I'm Fred Van Dyke, Executive Director of the Sable Institute, and we're here on abandoned.
Thank you. To find out how that story turns out, you'd have to come to research methods tomorrow. I want to take us to the foundational question. Now, Aldo Leopold put it well many years ago when he said, our tools are better than we are and get better faster than we do. They suffice to crack the atom, to command the times, but they do not suffice to the oldest task in human history, to live on a piece of land without spoiling it. We devote each summer on a college program one day for all the students, faculty, and professors to study local, bioregional, sustainable agriculture. One place we go is called Providence Farm. And I asked Farmer Ryan, why did you call it Providence? And he reminded me of what the word means. It's a noun. The protective care of God or nature as a spiritual power. As when someone says, I was sustained in those difficult times by providence. And providence, although an invisible power, is a very real power. The sustaining power of the creation around us as an act of blessing of God in our lives. And one of the things I began to wrestle with in a book I wrote recently called Between Heaven and Earth is the question, is there a tradition of a practiced land ethic? And is that tradition, in fact, a biblical and Christian tradition? So I'm going to start early in the Bible's great story in Genesis. The Lord said to Abraham, go forth from your country and from your relatives, and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. And I will make you a great nation. And I will bless you and make your name great, and so you shall be a blessing. As the environmental ethicist Holmes Ralston has said, Judaism is a landed faith. In fact, it's arguably the most land-based faith in the whole world, in all of history. And what Ralston means by that is, for the Jews, all of God's promises and blessings and manifestations of his love were fundamentally expressed through the fulfillment of his promise to them that they would receive a home, a land of their own. As Moses tells them in Deuteronomy 8, for the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks of water, of fountains, springs, flowing forth in valleys and hills. I'll come back to that passage in a little while, but I want you to remember where it is. For those concerned with the ethics of ecology, the fact that this biblical view of land includes, indeed we could say begins, with an understanding of land as a promise and possession from God to people, in this case first to an individual human being, is one of the great promises of history. But there is nothing so great that someone cannot criticize it. And for many people, the idea of God offering a human being
a land, a home of their own in this earth, is considered repulsively anthropocentric. And so again, Leopold, in his classic essay, The Land Ethic, wrote, Abraham knew exactly what the land was for. It was to drip milk and honey into Abraham's mouth. The assurance with which we regard this assumption is inverse to the degree of our education. Although Leopold wrote many good and beautiful things about the need to form an ethic for the care of the land, but as someone who has read almost everything he ever wrote, I can say with confidence and with regret that he never wrote anything smaller, meaner, more hypocritical, or more inaccurate than these words. As to the inaccuracy, the phrase Leopold quotes, land of milk and honey, is a phrase that is often repeated in Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, but never in Genesis. Never does God so describe the land to Abraham. And the first rule of criticizing an idea is that you must accurately understand it. And the smallness and the meanness of the remark, the insinuation that only stupid and uneducated people appreciate the good gifts that the land can give, is obviously false. And to the falsehood is added hypocrisy. Because Leopold's own ethic was a landed ethic. In fact, we call it the land ethic. But it's not based on an ethical abstraction. It's based on Leopold's own experience with land, with the restoration of a ruined farm in central Wisconsin. Leopold could not have written what he did about land, about the need to care for it, without the context of this place where he labored to care for it. In fact, it is in precisely understanding just how great a blessing good land is that has often been the motive for its conservation. And that was never more true in any life than in the life of Aldo Leopold. Now let me take you to another landscape, not Tennessee or Michigan or Wisconsin, but to the landscape of England and to another time, the 18th century. The English pastor and the amateur naturalist Gilbert White compiles a lifetime of nature observation, acquired in and around the small country village of Selborne, where he ministered, and puts it into a single book with an unpretentious title, The Natural Histories and Antiquities of Selborne. Now, it's difficult to keep track, but most scholars believe that the natural history and antiquities of Selborne is today probably the third or fourth single largest selling book ever produced in the English language. It has never been out of print since it was published in 1788. And one simple book struck a deep chord with the people of England who were just beginning to see what the progress of the Industrial Revolution could do to a landscape. And White is very clear in contrasting the wealth of urban industry with its alternative, the English countryside. And he frames that contrast as an invitation to the reader. He places it at the very beginning of his book in the form of a poem. See, Selborne spreads her boldest beauties round the very valley and the mountain throne. Wildly majestic, what is all the pride of flats with loads of ornaments supplied? Unpleasing, tasteless, infinite expense compared with nature's rude magnificence. Abraham traveled to Canaan at the word of God, and in all his remaining years in that long sojourn, he never possessed or owned anything in Canaan but a pair of burial plots, one for himself, one for his wife Sarah. His journey was not an exercise in greed. It was an exercise in faith. As the author of the book of Hebrews describes him, by faith, he, Abraham, lived as an alien in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, where he was looking for the city whose architect and builder is God. Now, as C.S. Lewis once noted, the problem of trying to make yourself stupider than you really are is that you very often succeed. And the Bible does not make the mistake of many past and present environmentalists and attempt to deny the reality that a good land is a great material blessing, a blessing of material and instrumental value. But it is a blessing to be received gratefully, humbly, without arrogance, without hubris. Now, arrogance and hubris are remarkably easy for human beings to acquire in their sinful state. And these qualities are not inversely proportional to the degree of our education. They're often positively correlated with it. For example, the English philosopher John Locke, considered one of the most learned and brilliant men of his day, developed a theory of property based on land. And he explained it this way: though the land and all inferior creatures be common to all men, yet every man has a property in his own person, and this nobody has any right to but himself. The labor of his body and the work of his hands, we may say, are properly his. Whatsoever, then, he removes out of the state that nature hath provided and left it in, he hath mixed his labor with, and joined to it something that is his own, and thereby makes it his property. Property, then, in Locke's view, is a human achievement. And according to Locke, land has no value until a person improves it. And for its natural products, Locke shows nothing but contempt. Bread, he says, is more than acorns. Wine and water. Cloth or silk and leaves, skin or moss. Now, from this view, Locke developed a theory of private property that made the landowner the holder of inalienable property rights that no king or government could usurp. The land and all its use belong to the landowner by virtue of his investment of himself in it. It's small wonder then that men like Thomas Jefferson, at the height of the American Revolution, saw in Locke's view of land and property a foundation and a justification for Americans to declare themselves independent of any obligations to an English king who had never invested any labor in their land or even set his foot upon it. The biblical view of land is very different than the view of John Locke. Land is a source of blessing and prosperity, but the blessing is to be received as a gift from God, and the response to that gift is to be gratitude and reverence. In his final admonition to the people in Deuteronomy, Moses reminds them the blessings of the land that God has chosen for them, a good land, a land of brooks of water, of fountains and springs flowing forth in valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land where you will eat food without scarcity, in which you will not lack anything, a land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills you can dig cotton. But, says Moses, the correct response to this abundance is thanksgiving to God, not hubris. When, he says, you have eaten and are satisfied, you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land which he has given you. Otherwise, you may say in your heart, my power and the strength of my hand made me this wealth. But you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who is giving you power to make wealth, that he may confirm his covenant, which he swore to your fathers,
to Abraham as this day. If environmentalists like Leopold are wrong to disparage the material blessings of a good land and the prosperity that it brings, they are right to remind us that there's more to land than wheat and barley, fig trees, and pomegranates. For the land itself is an active witness to the glory and the sovereignty of God, not simply a passive backdrop or stage on which God occasionally performs actions that are directed solely to human beings. And that is why Psalm 19 is explicit in its opening words, that heavens are telling the glory of God and the firmament declares his handiwork. And because the land is part of his word as well as part of his revelation, God treats the land as what ethicists would call a moral subject, something that can be treated rightly or wrongly. And he shows this most clearly in instituting the practice of the land Sabbath. When you come into the land which I shall give you, then the land shall have a Sabbath to the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather its crop. But during the 7th year, the land shall have a Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Now God goes on through the following verses in this 25th chapter of Leviticus to give instructions not only for the land's Sabbath to be observed every 7 years, but for a special observance in the year after the 7th sabbatical year, every 50th year. You shall thus consecrate the 50th year and proclaim a release through the land to all of its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his own property, and each of you shall return to his family. The land, moreover, shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine. You are aliens and sojourners with me. God does not impute ownership or rights of land to people because of their efforts to improve it. Rather, he attributes rights to land and sees human effort to make land productive as merely a cooperative contribution, and a lesser one at that compared to his own effort of making land fruitful. This rest is in part to benefit the land itself and the non-human creatures that live on it. Even your cattle and the animals that are in your land shall have all its crops to eat in the 7th year. But the land Sabbath had a purpose for people, and that purpose was to strengthen their faith in God and his ability to provide for them. And God anticipates their objection in the words that Moses speaks to them. If you say, what are we going to eat in the 7th year if we do not sow or gather in our crops? I will so order my blessing for you in the 6th year that it will bring forth the crop for 3 years. When you are sowing in the 8th year, you can still eat old things from the crop, eating until the 9th year when the crop comes in. We need to see the power of this proclamation most effectively by remembering its counterpoint proclamation in Genesis 3, the curse of the fall. And the curse of the fall was that man would eat bread by the sweat of his face. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat it all the days of your life. The blessing of the land Sabbath was that God's people would eat bread by the word of God while they rested from labor and while the land rested from cultivation. And in that rest, not in their effort, the land would become more productive. The blessing of obedience would be not only continued residence on the land, but increasing experience of learning how to live by faith on the land in the provision of God. and further the year of Jubilee, observed every 50th year, was to be an explicit recognition of God's ownership of the land, symbolic of the recognition of the control and autonomy of God over the universe, including the earth. In this revelation, the land Sabbath is instituted so that God's people can recognize God as land owner and recognize God's work, not their own, as the source of their provision and the foundation of their faith. Now, this text tells us something about what God thinks land is for. And he makes clear that in providing a Sabbath rest, the land itself is the subject of his care. God does not say, if we look at the original Hebrew, you, people, shall give the land a Sabbath rest, but rather the land shall have a Sabbath to the Lord. He used the land in terms familiar to environmental ethicists as morally considerable, something that you can treat rightly or wrongly, which can be treated rightly or wrongly by people, and therefore is to be protected by divine provision through the institution of this Sabbath rest. The people of Israel benefit from the land Sabbath, but it is the land which receives it. And the significance of the land Sabbath is revealed in the severity of the punishment for breaking it. God told his people that if they ignored his laws, including the land Sabbath, deportation and exile would be their punishment. In other words, receiving the land was the fulfillment of the promise of having faith in God. Removal from the land was the punishment for breaking faith with God. And that is what the Israelites did. They failed to observe God's command for the land Sabbath, at least after the institution of their monarchy, a period of about 490 years. They turned from God and they worshiped idols. They failed to establish a just and righteous community that would have revealed the character of God to the entire world. And the promised penalty for disobedience fell. The final words of 2 Chronicles chapter 36 close the story. Those who had escaped from the sword, he, Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king and conqueror of Jerusalem, carried away to Babylon to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of the prophet Jeremiah. Until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths, all the years of its desolation, it kept Sabbath until 70 years were complete. Now, what was that word of the prophet Jeremiah? But the exile would have a duration of 70 years, which corresponded to the 70 Sabbaths which were not given. The environmental lawyer, Christopher Stone, in his classic work, Should Trees Have Standing, argues for giving legal rights to environmental entities like trees, animals, ecosystems. And being a lawyer, Stone is very careful to define exactly what he means and what constitutes having rights means in a legal sense. Something has rights at a legal level if, first of all, action can be taken at its behest or on its behalf. Second, in granting relief, the court must take its injury into account, and the relief granted must run to the benefit of the injured party. The revelation of 2 Chronicles 36 precisely and exactly follows this understanding of rights in redressing the sins of the people against the land, acting on the land's behalf to establish justice for it. God acts to see that the people who are abusing the land are removed from the land. In granting relief, God acts to see that the injury of the land is taken into account, its lack of rest, so that the type and the length of the punishment rest for the land for 7 years, equal to the number of Sabbaths taken from it, run to the benefit of the injured party, the land. Although God's revelation of himself establishes the intrinsic value of his creation in Genesis 1, from the beginning, God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. It is his institution of the land's Sabbath and his punishment for failing to obey it that adds depth to our understanding of what it means to impute value to nature. These considerations don't disappear in the New Testament. They are intensified. So in the midst of the Great Tribulation, described in the book of Revelation, the 24 elders before the throne call out to God, saying, the nations were enraged, and your wrath came. And the time for the dead to be judged, and to reward the bondservants and the prophets and the saints, and those who fear your name, and to destroy those who destroy the earth. So the book of Revelation ends consistent with this word, not with redeemed people transported out of the world to heaven, but with, in the words of John, a new heaven and a new earth. I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride for her husband. And he who sits on the throne says, behold, I am making all things new. And there's more than one theologian who has pointed out that the one who sits on the throne does not say, I am making all new things. The one who sits on the throne speaks a word of redemption, not a word of recreation. This is the fulfillment of the word given long ago by one of the bondservants the elders spoke of, the prophet Hosea, speaking the word of God to the people of Israel, saying, in that day I will respond, declares the Lord. I will respond to the heavens, and they will respond to the earth, and the earth to the grain, the new wine, and the oil. I will have compassion on her who have not obtained compassion. I will say to those who are not my people, you are my people. And they will say, you are my God. So, what is our answer to the question, what is land for? Land is first of all for remembrance. Remembering with gratitude God's provision to sinful people in a fallen world. But to have the pleasure of gratitude, we must receive the land and all it produces as a gift from God, not an achievement of human effort. But that is not all the land is for. It is on the reality of the land where we live, whether that is northern Michigan or central Wisconsin or Tennessee or somewhere else, not in some philosophical abstraction, but that we learn to practice faith in God's provision. And in our care of the land, we learn to practice our faith in God's promise to redeem the earth and us. It is the materialist who wants everything for himself because he can see no others. It is the materialist who wants everything now because he sees no tomorrow. It is a redeemed disciple of Jesus Christ that cares for the lives of others because they, the others, are the objects of God's love, and in that love they can be seen, even others yet to be born. For these others have a future, which in faith we can also see, because God's promise to redeem his creation is present with us today. And so our life and our work on the land take on eternal significance. Even in trying to restore a vacant and deforested oil town, abandoned long ago.
we practice faith in the love of our neighbor today and the redemption of the world tomorrow, as Wendell Berry has said. Or rather ask, how can you love your neighbor if you don't know how to keep your filth out of his water supply or your poison out of his air? How can you love your neighbor if you can't produce anything from the earth and so have nothing to offer others? How can you practice virtue without skill? And the care of God's earth is a virtue. But the answer to Barry's question is, without skill, you can't practice it. So perhaps the most important answer to the question, what is land for, is it is for our schooling. It is for our education and the care of this world, this earth, this land until the day of its redemption. And it is for learning the love of others with whom we share it. And if we practice these things and receive the land as a gift from God, not as a trophy of our effort, then the land will prove to us what it has always proved to people of faith, that it is for yet one more thing. It is to bring glory to God in the life that he gives it, as he daily renews the face of the earth on which we live.
Time for questions. If you guys have any questions for Dr. Dyke, I'll bring the microphone to you if anyone has any questions. Comments.
You spoke about the land as good for our schooling. Can you provide some concrete examples of good schools?
Well, I'd start biblically. The people of Israel had a good school. They were brought to a land by the provision of God that was what he promised them it would be. It was everything that they could have hoped for. And by that, their faith was tangibly established. Now, we're not in Israel, and we're far removed from them in time and place. In Michigan, we are learning in the course of our work, for example, with the well pads, that what we did in extracting oil and gas was also a removal of the things which caused the trees to grow. That is, the pads have much less organic matter and moisture in their soil than the forest around them. We've compared the two. And more than that, what we did in the process of the extraction was to compact the soil to such an extent that very few things could penetrate it except invasive species like knapweed and leafy spurge. So we found that the 4 treatments that we used, this can produce the highest survival rate of the trees that we planted. So we learned from that. And we also learned that we, not someone else, are culpable and responsible in this in many ways. Not just the energy companies, but all of us who consume the products and benefit from the revenues. So it's not somebody else's problem. We're glad the energy companies are supporting us in doing it, but it's right that we're also the ones actually doing the work. That's one example of learning to land. And there are many others around us for farmers around us in northern Michigan. As we get to know them and they interact with our students, we're finding out that farmers, especially those that are working in a way that they want the land to continue to be productive in perpetuity, have stopped asking the wrong questions. Farmer Ryan, who works with us at the Institute, will tell the students, and all of us we're listening to, he says that at a certain point I stopped asking, what do I want to grow? I started asking, what does this land want to grow? And
then I began to grow that, and he started to become very prosperous doing it. Sorry, I can't give a complete answer in every context, but those within our small sphere of influence are some of the things we do.
What do you think some of your concerns would be for things like our national park system, and other vulnerabilities that we ought to be aware of? Because sometimes it seems it's protected, and then on the next moment, part of the land gets taken. And I think this may extend even the land trust and other things like that that we've tried to set up as somewhat of a defensive barrier there.
Well, the closest administrative unit, as the government would call us, of the National Park Service to us, is the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lake Shore. And Sleeping Bear Dunes, like all parks, if you look at their original mission statement, is to preserve the park in perpetuity for the enjoyment of the people. In other words, the park is to be preserved, but it's for the people to enjoy. I think pursuing that mission, the National Park Service has been very faithful. They have, to a large extent, done that. I haven't been to the Smoky Mountain National Park, but knowing people who work there, I'm confident that they're working to do that there. I worked for a long time in and around Yellowstone National Park. They work for the same effort there. They're people of integrity. The parks, of course, are not immune from either things that happen in the parks or things that happen outside the park that come into the park. So, at Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lake Shore, the spread of botulism, which is anthropogenically induced in many ways, causes high mortality among common loons. And dead loon carcasses wash up on the shores of Sleeping Bear. The emerald ash borer doesn't respect the park's boundary and moves in and kills the ash, which were an important component of very beautiful forests. And the people sometimes can do very thoughtless things as well, because the dunes are fragile, and if there are too many people, they erode and collapse, and the sediment falls into the lake. And the people who are fishing off the shore, the commercial fishermen, are and have been at times taking too many fish. And so as a result, the fishery is depleted, although that's a more complex story because some of those are native fish, like the lake trout, and others are introduced species, although no one wants to call a coho or a king salmon an invasive species. The loss of the lake sturgeon along the shores of the park is also a very sad story, which now is being brought back by the tribal nations of Michigan, like the Lower Louisiana and Ottawa Indians. But I think the Park Service has been faithful to their charge, but we also have to recognize the limitations of it. There are two great controversies going on in conservation right now, in my field of conservation biology. There's the paradigm, the more older paradigm, that nature must be protected from people. And the newer paradigm that sees conservation as an extension of economic development that says nature is to be protected for people so that they can use it. The parks are in that older paradigm, and we don't harvest their products. But increasingly, if we're going to have more and more lands rehabilitated and restored like these oil pellets, they'll have to be for people. They'll have to provide jobs for people who cut trees and for people who hunt for recreation and for other things. So the situation is complex. You'll have to tell me if I've answered your question or not. I think the Park Service is faithful to their mission. It's done a good job, and their people are people of integrity. But the parks are not the only element of land restoration. You can't have the whole earth be a park. Although E.O. Wilson wants to have half the earth be a park. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ramble, but I addressed your question.
It
The gist of the question is, do you think there is still a mandate from God to have a land Sabbath today? And the background of the question, I understand your comments were beautifully done about the importance of obedience to God and exercising faith in God, to believe that God will sustain you when you observe a land Sabbath under that old covenant era. And indeed, there may have been just a practical benefit in terms of renewing the soil. So there was benefit technically, but there was also benefit spiritually. What about the technical benefit today, now that we have fertilizers and other techniques to maybe overcome that liability? Is the spiritual benefit still existing today? Does God still expect a land Sabbath in our era?
Well, let me answer that at two levels. If you've read much of N.T. Wright, if you've read The Day the Revolution Began, he points out that in the New Testament, the one commandment of the 10 that the New Testament writers never talk about is the Sabbath, not the land Sabbath, but the Sabbath. And he points out that the reason they do that is because they see Christ and his resurrection as the fulfillment of it, that we have entered into it. And Jesus himself, was always going around breaking the Sabbath at the human level and not always paying very much attention to it. Now, the land Sabbath is not the human Sabbath. It's instituted on a scale that actually benefits the land. And the New Testament doesn't address it, frankly, not that specific practice. There are Christian traditions that still practice it, the Amish and the Mennonite in particular, and often do it by rotating crops in such a way that they have 1/7 of their land out of production every year, although some of them simply observe it in a very strict way. Now, the government will impose a penalty on you if you do it, because they will not suspend your property taxes on the year that you don't produce crops. So I don't have a clear biblical answer for that, except to say that as the land Sabbath was instituted, specifically to help people grow in faith in God by seeing his provision, I cannot see any biblical reason not to do it. Easy for me to say, because I'm not a farmer. So this would hurt more, maybe, if I were a farmer and I did it. But I can only say, to be faithful to the scripture, that in principle, I see no reason that it has necessarily been superseded. And the things that we think we do to increase the productivity of land by our inputs to it actually are often quite harmful to the land and to us. Human beings have become the single largest geologic force of adding nitrogen and phosphorus to the Earth's systems, much more than any natural process. And we are paying for that today. So I don't have a dogmatic answer for you, but I think it should be given every consideration as a matter of personal faith and trust.
I got a question. I want to actually pull the theological telescope back a little bit and just ask for your response as a Christian to other Christians who are making policy, citing scripture. And you're from Michigan, so as early as 2017, you have folks like Tim Walberg in Michigan's 7th Congressional District arguing that climate change exists, we need to do something to care for, the environment's a problem, there's a problem with the environment, but the scope of the problem isn't clear, and if it really becomes a problem, and this is a direct quote, God can take care of it, and that became an excuse to, we don't really need to do anything legislatively, God will just take care of it. He's echoing another member of Congress he works with who represented Illinois' 15th district, who basically said the earth will only end when God declares that time is over, the earth will not be destroyed by a flood. And these are people making policy today, right now, and doing so citing the Bible, the Christian tradition, or at least their understanding of it. So my question to you is, when we have people in considerable positions of power citing biblical witness or their interpretation, what would your response be to them when they say, God will just take care of it?
Saying God will take care of it is not citing Scripture. Knowing that God is in control, authoritatively and providentially, that is a scriptural position. Acting in a way that is contrary to the intentions of his providence is not a scriptural position. It's called disobedience. Our job in our limited human framework is to determine what actions of mine are congruent with God's greater plan and power and cooperate with that. It's been compared, I think, effectively to people living under occupation of an enemy government, like the people, for example, of France in the early part of World War II. They did not have the power to overthrow their oppressors, but they believed that redemption was coming. And so they acted in ways that were congruent to resist, and in the end, it came. We're in a similar position. So saying that God will take care of it is not a position of biblical obedience. Knowing that God will provide, that's biblical faith. But acting in ways that are consistent with affirming that the creation is very good, that it is intended to reflect the glory of God, that means you'll have to act in a way that the creation can actually reflect that. And as for people citing the Bible before that, of course they do, often incorrectly, but Christians who are actively engaged in this work, who have a much better or well-framed theological position, are very vocal. They don't always get the coverage they deserve, but for example, King University has had in the last 3 years 3 fellows active with Young Evangelicals for Climate Action, a very effective group that's always working the halls of Congress and the Senate about this work on climate action. And we have just reached a collaboration with Sable and YUCA to provide a $5,000 fellowship for students who are YUCA fellows to come and study with us to learn about how to do climate assessment and climate remediation through our courses. And we want to do that because we want to invest in people who want to become leaders in that field, especially politically. We have the former national spokesperson for YUCA on our faculty. So I'm not saying that to boast, just to say that we're a small institute with small influence, but as far as we can see, as God gives us to see what is right, that's the way we want to act cooperatively. Not saying, I'm sure it'll turn out fine again. So I'm as frustrated as you are with that, but that's not a theologically framed Christian position. You'll have to do better than that. And frankly, a discussion of the theological principles would be very healthy for everyone, including our political environment.
We talked a little bit earlier. I'm a full-time farmer, and we've learned to, with the help of state and federal support, try to grow grass year-round. And we rotate our cattle among that. The white-tailed deer, they haven't got the picture. They come from far and wide, and those areas we're trying to preserve to give a rest. The deer sleep there, but they eat a lot. And so I'm working, fortunately, we were able to get kill permits to harvest some deer. Virginia, and I want to ask for your comment on different laws in different states. To be brief, Virginia allows us to harvest deer and share with other people to donate or eat it ourselves or bury it. There's some other states I'm familiar with. You can get permission to kill a deer, but you cannot eat it. You must area, but you cannot eat it because there's various reasons for that. A town nearby here recently had a debate about whether deer can be killed within the city limits with crossbow, bow, and arrow because deer are destroying so much property, people's lawns, people's gardens, flowers, and things like that. I have neighbors who cease gardening because the deer are so bad. We've displaced natural parts of ecosystems, apex predators, and so forth. And so we're living in an area, white-tailed deer have adapted very well to us as humans. And so within the bigger picture of what you shared tonight, how would you reflect on white-tailed deer as an example of how we can honor God, manage our land together as communities, but also deal with this problem of white-tailed deer, which is one of the most deadly animals in the country with collisions that people have every year. White-tailed deer, I have the car I have outside now has dents, as do all my vehicles from people here.
Let me start with a different member of our family that I have more personal experience with when I was a wildlife biologist with the state of Montana. Elk. Good, respectable herd of elk can come into an alfalfa field and completely remove the crop in one night. That's a complete loss for the farmer who invested in growing that alfalfa, and the deer took it. The white-tailed deer can do the same thing. In fact, not so many years ago, the Forest Service was sued, not by farmers, but by conservationists, because they were accused and found guilty of following policies that enhanced high deer densities, which led to the removal of endangered plant species. Because deer cannot tell the difference between the endangered species and the common species, and so they'll eat whichever one is there, but the endangered species will disappear faster. And so they're a terrible havoc on farmers. They wreak havoc in orchards in Michigan. So do elk. We have elk as well. The federal and state governments have a responsibility to both manage the deer and do it in a way that is not disruptive to the people living with the deer. Now, I think that the best way for state and federal agencies to do that is to manage the harvest, generally during the fall, to reduce deer densities to lower levels where they are too high. And the reason I think that is both biological and biblical. You may remember one of the commands in the Old Testament that if you find a nest, you may take the eggs, but you are not to remove the mother. In other words, you take what nature produces, but not diminish its productivity. So I would not advocate, at least not without extreme duress, that deer should be killed at any time of year. If you do that, you're removing the capacity of that species to produce more of itself. But biologically, the proper way to do it would be to liberalize your hunting permits during the fall, reduce the density of the deer, and then provide subsidies for farmers to enact what shall we call them, the military would call them countermeasures, to put things up that would protect the crops from the deer without necessarily killing the deer. And a lot of farmers do that in orchards. That you've seen how they do it. They protect the trees, or they put up electric fences, things of that nature. That's an additional cost. That expense gets into income. That reduces the profit margin. But if the government subsidized it, then that would be a way of helping to protect the livelihood of people who are properly using the land. That's what I would do if I had the power. And in extreme circumstances, yes, there may be situations in which deer may have to be removed out of season in order not to cause permanent damage.
I think one more question, if anyone has one they really want to ask. The students are getting antsy. So, does anybody have any questions? No? All right. Thank you, Dr. Van Dyke.